I stared at the paper in my shaking hands, reading the same line over and over again, hoping the words would change. But they never did. Paternal match. Not detected. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. My father, the man who raised me, kissed my scraped knees, taught me how to drive, and called me his little girl, was not my father. My hands went cold. I dropped the paper on the kitchen counter and backed away from it like it was poison. I remember screaming, like some animal had taken over my body. I punched the fridge door until my knuckles split open. I collapsed on the tile floor and cried so hard my voice broke into silence. 30 years. 30 years of love, lies, and one massive betrayal. And that betrayal had a name. My mother. Before I continue, I want to say a massive thank you to all our subscribers. If you are new or have been watching but have not yet subscribed, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button. It is what fuels this channel and keeps us going. And do not forget to share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Now, back to the day everything I believed about my life was destroyed. My name is Felicia. I live in Colorado. I turned 30 last fall. I am the only child of Rhonda and the man I always knew as my dad, Michael. I took a cheap ancestry DNA test one weekend because I was bored and curious. Everyone on Instagram was doing it. I expected to see some Irish, some German, maybe a surprise cousin in Florida. What I got instead was a complete mismatch. My maternal lineage checked out fine. But on the paternal side, nothing. No connection. No heritage. Just a blank space where half my identity should have been. I waited 2 days before I told my mom. I wanted to believe there had been some kind of lab error. Maybe the company switched results. Maybe it was a glitch. But when I showed her the paper, she looked at it once, and all the color drained from her face. She sat down on the couch and started crying before I even asked the question. She did not lie. She did not try to twist it. She just broke down. She told me that when she was 29, she had an affair with my dad's best friend, Milton. Milton, who was married to her best friend, Rhonda. Milton, who used to babysit me when I was little. Milton, who was my godfather. Milton was my real father. I felt like I could not breathe. "You were born out of something terrible," she whispered, her hands covering her mouth. "But you were the best thing that ever happened to me." I could not look at her. I could not even cry. I was ice. Numb. Then I asked her one question I almost regretted. Who else knows? She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and said one name that made my stomach turn. "Your Aunt Lorraine." I drove straight to Aunt Lorraine's house that night, shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I barely remember the drive. All I could hear were my mother's words repeating in my head like an echo I could not escape. Your Aunt Lorraine knew. Aunt Lorraine was my mom's older sister. She lived 10 minutes away, always baked cookies during holidays, and spoiled me like a second mom. But now I had questions and I needed answers. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, eyes swollen, jaw clenched, she did not say anything. She just stepped aside and let me in. "Sit down, Felicia," she said, almost like she had been waiting years for this moment. I sat across from her on her velvet couch. "How long have you known?" I asked. She sighed, folded her hands in her lap, and stared at me with that tight, pitying look people give you before they tell you your dog died. "Since you were born," she said quietly. "I was there when your mother fell apart after Milton ended the affair." I told her to tell the truth, but she was terrified. "Michael was already in love with you. He thought you were his daughter." She could not destroy that. I felt sick. So many lies. So many chances to tell the truth, and they all chose silence. "Does Milton know?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "He found out when you were 2. My hands went cold. "Does Rhonda know?" She suspected. She found a letter once, hidden in Milton's sock drawer. But she never brought it up. She stayed for her children, for her image. I wanted to scream. Every adult I had trusted had chosen comfort over truth. I was the only one in the dark. I had been the only one living a lie without knowing it. I went home and threw up. The next day, I sat across from Rhonda in her sunroom. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired. Her eyes were sharp, though watchful. "You know why I am here," I said. She nodded. "Your mother told you." I asked her how long she had known. She stared at her teacup for a long time before speaking. "I had a dream the night you were born. Milton held you in the hospital, and I saw something in his face. A softness, a guilt, a pride. I asked him once, just once, if you were his. He said no. But I knew. I just did not want to know." Her voice cracked. "You looked so much like him. It hurt to breathe." I did not know what to say. How could I comfort the woman whose husband betrayed her and created me in the process? That night, I told my father, Michael, the man who raised me, the only man I had ever called Dad. He sat in silence for a long time after I told him. When he finally looked at me, his face was pale, like he had aged 10 years in 1 minute. "I always knew you were not mine," he said. "But I chose to love you anyway." I could barely hold myself together. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I need time," he said. "This changes everything." And just like that, the man who had been my foundation, my protector, my constant, was gone. But it was not over yet. A week later, I received a text from my cousin, Natalie. "You need to ask Grandma about the summer of '92. She helped cover it up too." I drove to my grandmother's house in silence, numb from days of betrayal. The summer of '92. I was born in October of that year. Whatever happened that summer, it must have been when everything began. My mother's secret. My real father. The cover-up. When I arrived, Grandma was sitting in her favorite rocking chair, staring out the window. She looked smaller than I remembered, frail, like truth had been quietly eating away at her all these years. "Grandma," I said softly, "I need to ask you something." She did not turn her head. "You want to know why I never told you the truth?" I nodded. My throat burned. She finally looked at me. "I told your mother to keep it quiet. I told her to protect her marriage, protect your father. Michael was a good man. He loved you before you were even born. I thought we could spare everyone the pain. But you lied to me," I said. "All of you did." She nodded. "Yes, we did. That was it. No excuses. No grand apology. Just the cold, quiet truth." I left that house feeling like an orphan, unanchored, unloved, and unsure of who I even was. For weeks, I spiraled. I avoided family. I stopped answering texts. I stood in front of the mirror one night and stared at my face, searching for traits I had never questioned. My high cheekbones, my olive skin, my curly hair, and I wondered, what else had been built on lies? I started therapy. I wrote in journals. I cried in grocery store parking lots. I called in sick to work just to lie on the couch and stare at the ceiling. Then one night I wrote 2 letters. One to Milton, my biological father, and one to Michael, the man who had raised me. To Milton I wrote, "You do not get to come back into my life now. You made your choices. You disappeared. Stay gone." To Michael I wrote, "You are the only father I have ever known. I understand if you need space, but I want you to know that I love you. That has never changed." 2 weeks later, Michael showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, but he held my letter in his hand. "I read it 10 times, he said. "I still do not know what to feel, but I know that you are my daughter, no matter what that test says." We hugged for a long time. I broke down in his arms like I was 10 years old again. That hug was not the end of my pain, but it was the beginning of my healing. My mother and I still speak, but the closeness is gone. Some wounds do not close clean. I have not spoken to Milton again. Rhonda and her family have distanced themselves. Aunt Lorraine still calls, but I keep her at arm's length. As for me, I am still rebuilding, still figuring out who I am. But I am doing it on my terms this time. No more lies. No more pretending. Just truth, even when it hurts. And that is how I survived. If you felt this story, please take a moment to comment your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are not already subscribed, I would love for you to join us here. These stories are raw, real, and for people like you. Thank you for being part of this space.